Welcome to the Choice Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Nastasha McKeon, founder and CEO of Choice Juicery, author of Plant Food is Medicine, and naturally a health, wellness, and mindfulness enthusiast. I believe that happiness is a choice, and I built my company upon this ethos. This show is a platform where we will discuss all things health, wellness, and mindfulness in hopes of inspiring you further on your journey. We will be sharing inspiring stories, health, wellness, and mindfulness hacks, as well as anything else pertaining to living your best choice life. My hope is that you may hear something on every episode of this podcast that will genuinely be of value in your life. Welcome back to the Choice Lifestyle Podcast. This is Nastasha McKeon, your host, also CEO and founder of Choice Juicery, as well as author of Plant Food is Medicine. This episode, as well as every other episode, is sponsored by Choice Juicery. If you want to support this podcast, please visit us at any of our 7 Southern California locations. We have 6 in San Diego and 1 in Orange County, making our way up the coast. You can also visit us online at choicejuicery.com, where we are shipping many of our products online now, so available nationally. Probably the most exciting product that we have on there is our gluten-free bread that we just launched shipping on. Check out the reviews. Don't just take it from me. It's one of the best gluten-free breads on the market. Not only is it gluten-free and plant-based, it also tastes amazing, and it's all organic as well. Our greens powder, all your daily greens and prebiotics, is also available online, as well as our entire line of elixirs, our nut butters. If you haven't tried our cake batter almond butter, you haven't lived. Of course, my cookbook is also available online as well through our website, and you can purchase a copy of that as well if you want to support the show. So I'm very excited to introduce you to our guest today. Donny Starkins happens to be one of my personal favorite yoga teachers. I absolutely adore him, but he's also a professional speaker. He is a transformation coach. He's the co-host of Comeback Stories podcast. He leads classes and workshops and seminars across the world. Was a Division I baseball player who suffered a career-ending injury, and that led him into his past with addiction, which ultimately led him to his journey with sobriety and led him to where he is today, inspiring the world. So I'm so excited to have him on today. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Donny, welcome to the Choice Lifestyle Podcast. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I am so excited to introduce you to our audience and also to hear your story firsthand, because you've been my yoga teacher for like a year and a half now. And I didn't even know what your story was until I started researching. I mean, I know you and I've heard a little bit through what you teach in your classes and your online content, but I was doing a little bit of research before I, invited you on, and learned that your story is even more fascinating than I realized. So yeah, I'm excited to have you here and to just have a conversation with you about the journey of your life.
Yeah, I'd love to ask you the question maybe first real quick of you've been my student for a year and a half. What is it like? Like, what's your experience as a student of the message that I choose to carry?
I love it. Thank you for the question. So
Yeah.
it's funny because this is full circle for me. The last interview I did was with a dear friend of mine for like 15 years. He was my very first yoga teacher, Mike Sherbakov.
Oh
And
yeah.
the next interview that I do is with you. And it's interesting because you were my first teacher after a 7-year hiatus from yoga. So Mike was
What?
my first
How
introduction to
messy did that
yoga.
get in your life?
Oh, so messy. I got pregnant with my daughter, which is a crazy long story, my youngest. And when I found out I was pregnant, it was unexpected, unplanned. Found out I was pregnant. Of course, I was like, I immediately, my life just got turned upside down. I was a single mom already, opening my 3rd store at the time. And I just found out I'm going to have a baby. So it was a crazy time in my life. And everything, I went into, survival mode, and everything that was for me kind of just stopped and went out the window. And I didn't realize until years later when my girlfriend, Christina, invited me to a yoga class, and it happened to be your class. And this is like last year in 2023, or maybe 2022, actually. It was like the end of 2022, maybe.
Yeah, it
And
could have been 2021. I moved here in 2021, so I don't know when, but yeah, it could have
yeah,
been. I don't know. Yeah.
couple years back, and it was my first class, and I didn't, it's like contrast provides clarity. I didn't even know what was missing until I got on my mat. And I remember that first day like choking back the tears. Like I didn't want everyone to, it's been a while since I've been in that, yoga space. And I was like, oh my God, like, why am I crying? But I realized I was coming home to a part of myself that I hadn't, been with in years. And my experience when I left that class was like, first of all, part of my expression, holy shit, yoga's changed in the last few years, because when I went to yoga, it was kind of like these like set routines, and it was very structured and very like I could do the whole thing with my eyes closed because it was like kind of the same thing every week. And with your classes, I am forced to be in the present moment. If I try to be anywhere else in my head, I'm going to lose track of where I am, because there's a lot of like free flowing, and I have to be fully present, and I have become hooked again, and I absolutely love it. When I don't go, I feel the difference. It's such a beautiful part of my life. And also you bring back like spirituality into yoga, which it's not just about the movements, and it's not just about the Lululemons and the coolest mat and the coolest mat towels. It's like, it's actually about the yoga and the practice and the breath, and not caring what other people are thinking or doing and how you're comparing, but just being in the practice of, and being with you and being with your mat. And it's been a beautiful, reintroduction for me back into yoga.
Wow. I'm so glad I asked that question. I think it's good to ask that. And I don't often, but to hear that reflection, I mean, I was ready to cry right now just listening to that, because it's so fulfilling for me, because yoga saved my life. And I believe yoga can save the world because it saved my life. So if it could save my life, why couldn't it save the world? And I think I started a podcast a few years ago with my co-host and my best friend and soulmate brother, Darren Waller, who plays tight end in the NFL. He's played for the Las Vegas Raiders for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. And then this year was traded to the New York Giants. And we called it Comeback Stories. And it's all about, everybody has a comeback story, but everybody loves a comeback story. But that word comeback at the time didn't have the meaning that it has today. And for me today, it's like, come back to your body, come back to your breath, come back to your practice, come back into nature, because that's how we get into our own nature. It's about coming back. And I feel like there's something happening in my life right now where I've landed myself in Encinitas, California, where yoga was brought into the United States. And in my personal opinion, and just this is my experience, is that there was a big gap there in the Mecca, or the place that supposedly yoga was brought here. Spirituality there and the foundation has been laid. I mean, I live very close to the meditation gardens, and I feel that, and I know why I'm here. I answered the call from the ocean after teaching for 10 years in Arizona, and building this community and teaching 20 classes a week for almost 6 years straight. That's a lot of yoga classes. And those are just the set classes that I had. And I just cranked, and then COVID hit, and I started coaching about 5 years into my teaching. And I never really went back and taught a lot in studio after COVID. And then I went through a breakup, and that breakup was really the only thing keeping me there. I had family, but I always had the call from the ocean, because I grew up in Phoenix, and we were zonies, and we'd come to Mission Beach every year. And it's just always had a pull. And I had a friend about 5 years ago who committed 4 years ago that committed suicide, and he lived in Cardiff, and he was so kind, and he'd come out, he'd let my mom stay at his place. And yeah, he just couldn't kick the disease of addiction and mental health, and had back issues, and got addicted to painkillers, and ended up hanging himself. And I'm so grateful for him, because he got me here. And I'm grateful for him because he let my mom stay at his place when he would be at teacher training in Nosara in Costa Rica. And my mom would come out here, and she's a school teacher. She doesn't make shit for money. She loves California. Yeah. And so he would let her stay there. And so it makes sense now as to why all of that happened, because it got me here, and I fell in love with the energy of North County. And I never understood the pull until, I remember 11 years ago when I started teaching trying to actually do meditation. I was already a yoga teacher. So this is like probably 10 years ago. And I couldn't meditate because my mind could never stop thinking. Like most people, when I tell them, why don't you meditate? They say, because my mind can never stop thinking. I'm like, well, nobody's does. So what if you just gave your mind something to think about, or actually think about what you're thinking about, if that's easier to comprehend it. Yeah. And so I feel strongly that I've been called to carry this message of yoga and teach a yoga class that is accessible to maybe a person that looks like a yogi or whatever stereotype they might have. I think yoga is for everybody, and every body is different and every day is different. And so if we're really practicing the mindfulness aspect of it, we let the practice meet us where we're at. We have to know where we're at. And so, this coming back is really landing, and it's actually turning into a movement, and I'll be able to share more. We'll go round 2 when it launches and talk a lot more, but I am launching an event, and this is the beginning of it. And it's a wellness immersion, a 6-hour wellness immersion of like a mini 1-day festival with some way more intentional, absolutely no alcohol. We will support the plant medicine vendors and the local vendors like you for sure when we hit San Diego, but we're launching in Austin on May 5th.
Wow.
And I went to Austin to look at a space for a retreat, and I walked out of this space and I go, oh my God, this is a fucking event place. And it's a sick event place. And I'm like, I got to do an event. And then since then, the unfolding in my life and one of my co-leads, Mallory, she came into my life. I've loved Rufus Du Sol forever. I've played Rufus Du Sol playlist. And Tyrone and his wife, they live in Encinitas, and his wife is a student of ours. And she's not only a student of ours, she's my teacher, my therapist, my accountability person, my literal angel who's come into my life in like a month and a half. And this relationship is insane. Her partnership with Tyrone is insane. It is like divine love. The work that they do together as partners. And I'm just grateful to be in that experience of it. And we've talked a lot about Rick Rubin and his work, The Creative Act. And I'm convinced, for me, in my experience, that is my Bible. And I started to apply the principles right away. And I was so taken back by the book that I started a workshop, mastermind, every week. I wasn't even done with the book. I didn't even really know what I was teaching, but I know.
Best way to learn is to teach, right?
Exactly. So a lot of the things I do today are super selfish, but they're in ways that actually serve people because they're serving me. And before, it was selfishness and self-centeredness because I was an addict, and I played college baseball. I had a massive surgery on my knee. It's a cadaver transplant of my meniscus.
Wow.
That was my 5th surgery on my knee, my senior in college. Wow. And I just tried to play hurt, and had my first one after my freshman year in high school. It was never the same. This doctor presented me with this operation. It was a cadaver transplant of my meniscus. It had never been done in Arizona, but it had been done 7 times across the country. And the doctor assured me that if all went well, it would be like having a new knee, and I would maybe even play baseball again. So there was this hope for me, and he sold me on a dream. And I woke up from that surgery, and I woke up in this dark hospital room. I remember there being a morphine drip, and I would hit it probably every 8 minutes, and it would only go off every 10. And I looked at my leg, and my leg was bruised from my hip to my toe, and my knee was like swollen, bent. So in rehab, I would have to go to rehab, and they would tie it in a straight board to get the extension back into my leg. And long story short, my body rejected the piece. I was bedridden for a month and a half. I got prescribed 80 Percocet a week for a month straight, and then cut off completely cold turkey. And I blamed my addiction once baseball was over for me on that. I blamed it on the doctor that screwed me over, and my family that didn't understand, and my friends that didn't support me. And when I got into rehab, I was like, what the hell happened to my life? Where did it all go wrong? And when I finally did some personal development, which started in 12-step work and therapy, I realized I didn't want to feel the emotional pain of the loss of baseball, not the physical trauma and all of that. Yes, it was the perfect storm. But when I took ownership and I looked at my shit, that was it. So I numbed it every day by popping pills and partying and doing drugs, and pills and prescription pills and Xanax and Valium, and all those were the ones that really had me. I did every drug. But what had its grip were the pills. Those are the ones that I wasn't taking to get fucked up. I was taking them to feel normal.
Yeah.
Well, it's like what a deep breath does for me today is when the pills would kick in, I could go face life on life's terms for a couple hours and not be scared to walk out of the door. And then the pills would start to wear off, and then the cycle would happen again. And I would start to think about, when am I going to take the next ones? And I'm running out now, and I get a prescription that's for a month. Yet mine are gone in 3 days. What am I going to do? That is the hook it has you. And you're talking about hooked. Yes, yoga has you hooked in a healthy way. This had its hooks in me, where I overdosed and almost died multiple times.
Wow.
And was still convinced I didn't have a problem. But when my life got so bad, and I had some bottoms, overdosing was a bottom, but I wasn't done.
Yeah.
And that's why it's like such a delusional disease, but it is a disease, and I know people will fight that, and all you have to do is educate yourself and not judge, and grow a little understanding, and understand that whoever's doesn't understand addiction doesn't understand that they're addicted to a few things also. So it's all good, and we're just like breaking the stigma, and so I started teaching yoga. My mom got me into yoga. At my rock bottom, she said, "You need to go to yoga," and I said, yoga's for girls and hippies. I'm not doing that shit. And I did it once with her, and it changed everything from a physical. I knew I would do it the rest of my life, but little did I know what it would do for the mind and the soul. And that's when I went into teacher training, and it just like transformed my life. And I've been teaching 10 years.
It's so funny because you're, different and similar at the same time. Mike was just sharing his story about how resistant he was to yoga because he was like a Marine, and Marines don't go to yoga. And then he went to his first class, and
Mike
he
is
signed
a
up.
Kent doll.
He signed up for a 30 pack and like went every single day for 30 days and then became a teacher. So it's funny to hear these men that I look up to in my life that had this resistance to this thing that ended up being like such a saving grace for them and changed their lives in such a beautiful way. That's so fascinating.
I love Mike so much. I met him at Wanderlust when they were doing this. Is like, there's no coincidences, but Wanderlust Yoga Festival years ago. And we just ended up hanging out in the same cruise, and then stayed close on social media, and then moved here. And then he was here too. He is like one of the most genuine human beings ever, and one of the most good looking dudes I've ever seen in my life. And I'm
totally. That's so funny. Yeah. We've been friends for like 15 years and I just adore him.
Reflective, affirming thing for me when they say your vibe attracts your tribe. On my retreats, I see the people who show up. So I'm excited to really scale it and see the level, because the foundation of the people and where it's coming from yoga, the roots of it. And there's a lot of companies that started with the roots in yoga. There's people that started in their roots of yoga and they've got away from it, like you did for 7 years, and you came back. Yeah. This is why that word, I hear it all the time now. And, if you're a meditator like me in the beginning, and you sit and meditate and you're like, oh, my mind goes here, my mind goes there, you just come back. You're noticing that it's going there. And that's actually a good thing, because you're noticing it. And awareness is the first step in creating any kind of change. So don't beat yourself up when you're noticing it. That's like doing a rep with a free weight. And every time you notice and you come back, your mind is getting stronger. So just keep coming back. If you're in a 12-step program, just keep coming back. Keep coming back to your mat. When you said 7 years, and I said, how shitty did that get? Because if you took yoga away from me for a day, like, forget about it. I'll be using drugs in like 2 weeks if I don't do yoga. Wow. The most important part of mine, for sure. Like my sobriety, it's the important part. Like more than 12-step stuff, yoga is my foundation.
That's beautiful. And I love what you're saying about keep coming back, keep coming back, keep coming back. Because one of my favorite sayings, this woman, Leilani Munther, who I just adore and love everything that she does, she says it's about progress and not perfection. And I've always loved that with everything that I'm doing. It's like I have to remind myself, I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm just trying to make progress. It's just like, what's the next best step I can take? What's the next best thing I can do? Sure, I fell off the yoga wagon, but like I can take this class and I can go back. Or, okay, I didn't meditate for a day and I broke my 1.5-year streak. Like, that's okay. I can meditate tomorrow. It's like, it's not about being perfect. It's not trying to get somewhere. It's just about like the journey towards it. And it's about making that progress every day, doing the best you can with what you've got. So I love that you touched on that. Before we go any further, I have to go back to, you were talking about Mallory and yoga. And I just have to say how funny it was yesterday when you're like, oh, this, she does sound healing and stuff. You guys have to connect. And you introduced me to this like lovely woman who was sitting next to me in yoga, and we start chit-chatting back and forth. And, and then a few minutes later, you introduced her to the class and you mentioned that she happened to be the wife of, Rufus Du Sol.
Yeah.
I was like, what? I'm embarrassed to admit this, but like 1.5 years ago, I didn't know who Rufus Du Sol was, because I'm like one of those people, I'm like, I live under a rock or something. And a group of friends were going to go see Rufus Du Sol at Red Rocks, and I got invited. And I've always wanted to see a show. Last year? I wanted to see a show at
Oh,
Red Rocks. I've never been. And I was like, I don't know who Rufus Du Sol is, but I'm in. So I looked up Rufus Du Sol to start listening to some of their songs so that I wouldn't be like the only idiot at the concert who didn't know Rufus Du Sol. And I was like, oh, I recognize like a song. And then I went to this concert and it was a spiritual experience. I could not believe like how incredible they were live. And then at Red Rocks, it was just honestly one of the most powerful moments of my life, was just dancing my heart out in Red Rocks to Rufus Du Sol. So, I have a special connection because of that. So I literally, my jaw dropped to the floor when you said that in class. So
well, it
funny.
makes me
Very cool.
smile. Like I was that fan. I've been that fanboy, like to this weird level of like, what's the obsession or what is the call?
Yeah.
And on their album Surrender, which that album has so much gold that will not go away for a really long time. I can promise you that, because there's even more gold in it. But there's a song, Devotion, that says, answered the call from the ocean. And it's just funny, the timing of everything and
Totally.
syncing up. And Tyrone and I have the same sobriety birth date. He's sober. But there's this beautiful synchronicities of answering a call, trusting, and watching this unfold. And as you explained that, I'm like, that was me. And now it's like this partnership. And honestly, like where I have more value is with his wife, who
Yeah.
is my coach and therapist. I have my NFL football player friend. We have a relationship. He's a 6'6" beast, but he's sensitive and quiet and introverted, and he's a musician. And so real time, we're all in town doing an event, and she's coaching us as in a therapy session, but we're also friends. I'm like, this is so fucking cool.
I
Like
love
open
it.
feedbacks. It's just the safest space. And that's, I think, what I'm on a mission to really get back to, is creating safe space
Yeah.
on the West Coast here, in the place that was where yoga was brought.
Yeah.
Because I believe this movement, because it's so big and it has the right people in it, that we're going to have our own safe space, because it is
Yeah.
going to be so big. So it has to come back to this magical land that I know it's why I'm here.
I love it. You're so lit up. I love it. I feel it when you talk about it. It's so exciting to witness. And I look forward to seeing what magic is created out of that.
You'll be a part
I,
of it. Trust me.
I hope
I
so.
what I've seen in oh well, what I have seen in this whole thing for me is, and by the way, I think it's important to keep bringing up Rick Rubin for context, because my reality, creating my own reality, which I have that like the little tattoo on my finger, the symbol for it. We're all creating our own reality. So if you don't want
Hmm.
to own that, like if you really want to blame it on somebody else, well,
Yeah.
you are creating your own reality. I had a hard conversation
Yes.
with someone a couple of days ago that isn't in the best reality, the situation.
Hmm.
And then people don't want to share that, but we do create it. Like if you're struggling, why? Well, then ask for help. Well,
Yeah.
but I did, but they didn't call me or whatever. I'm like, well, did
Yeah.
you call them? Like when you stop making excuses, you start making
Hmm.
changes. And I did that forever, but it's hard to. I can't be around people like that
Yeah.
aren't willing to listen and be coachable. If they're not awake to it, but if they're open and
Yeah.
they're honest and they're
Yeah.
willing, like I'll
Yeah.
take anybody. So when I see people like you that have been showing up and showing up, I'm starting to see this abundance show up in my life. And then I'm like, ooh, because for me, abundance was my word of the year last year. And I would always say abundance flows to me and through me, to me and through me. I need
Mm.
nothing. Like I want a good ocean view. I don't care what kind of car I have. I don't
Yeah.
need that stuff. I want a minimal life where I can create in a space that like lets my soul on fire. And I don't need
Yeah.
anything else.
Yeah.
But I'm
I
grateful
love
for
that.
that, because my addiction taught me that selfishness and self-centeredness is the core of our disease. And so the
Absolutely.
antidote is service. And that's how AA
Yes.
started, right? It was one guy helping another guy. And he realized when he was helping his friend who was struggling to stop drinking, he wasn't thinking about drinking. And he's like, oh my God, I'm not drinking
Wow.
when I'm helping you. And that's how AA started. And then
Wow.
it was starting to grow so big that even the founder wanted to implement psychedelics at the time. And then they didn't because government got involved and all of that. And then
I didn't know that with AA or NA, I didn't know that plant medicine was ever, I had no idea that history, that background.
yeah,
Is that what you just said?
that's like what gave me permission. hearing, I mean, AA was formed, I mean, basically by like what I just said, with two men, and one guy was a doctor was trying to help his friend who he was newly sober, battling the detox phases of alcoholism. His friend was struggling too. When he went to go help his friend, he realized, I didn't think about drinking when I was helping you. And that's really the quickest way out of self-pity is, right, go help somebody else, right? Service is like the greatest life hack. I know that for a fact because I lived a very selfish, self-centered life and took down and caused my mom and family so much pain and worry. And so luckily through that, I've been able to find the antidote, the cheat code to life, which is service. I see that. And so it's not, my selfishness is my selflessness. Like I know what it's like to try to make it all about me. And if I don't stay in the work, that can get leaky, which is why when I was 3 years sober, I relapsed once. And I have I'll have 12 years in on May 5th when we're doing the event on May 5th in Austin, Texas. That's where we're launching this.
I'll be there.
Yeah. So, but I would say if you watch the documentary, How to Change Your Mind, I think they talk about it a little bit in there. But the bottom line is, like, government got involved, and it was when they just put a nix on psychedelics, and then it went away.
Wow.
And so the board, when he approached the board or whoever was choosing of what to implement, they said no to psychedelics. So think about how things would be different. But it's like when humans get involved and get in the way, it stops the evolution of it. And so luckily we've woken up and we're using plant medicines, and I'm using them in my sobriety, and I own my sobriety date, and I don't care what anybody else thinks. Because I used to judge the people that were sober that did plant medicine before me. And I'd be like, oh, you're not really sober. So when people question me, I'm like, dude, it's all good. I did the same thing. I get it. Yeah. Like you might be open one day, you might not, but I am more sober than ever, and my sobriety only matters to me.
Absolutely. It's interesting to me because as I'm learning this and hearing this, a part of me is sad inside because my mom was in and out of NA my whole childhood. She struggled with severe addiction to crystal meth my whole childhood. Oof. She's got her life together now as a result of an ayahuasca journey that I sent her to go do in Peru about, 7 years ago. But, my whole childhood, I feel like it could have been different. Not that, it's good to dwell on the past, but I just think like had it not been interfered with the NA and AA programs, like the impact that it could have had, when my mom was going into those programs, had it actually had the effect, then, my childhood would have looked very different. So, like you, finding that journey for me, I struggled with it growing up with, and a drug addict for a mother. I was always anti anything that looked like a drug, smelled like a drug, I was like, no, it's a no for me. I never touched anything my whole life. I was like, always prided myself on never partaking in any of that stuff. It was like one of those, we have these identities that we carry. And so when
you're like a total square.
Totally. Yes. I absolutely.
It reminds me of one of my ex-girlfriends, which is beautiful in a way, but it's an illusion of control, right? Like
exactly. Now I know that. And it took a lot to get there because I started finding that curiosity within myself. I read Michael Pollan's books and started to, find documentaries and the reality of truth on YouTube and all these things. And I was like fascinated and drawn to it. But I was like, oh, I can't do that though. Cause like, I don't do that stuff. It's like the story. And then one day I pushed through that story and I got to have my first experience with shamans. My first, psychedelic experience was with 2 shamans and psilocybin in a healing journey. And it was radically profound for me. And, there's so many different tools out there, and there's to each their own. I would never tell someone you should do this. I would never tell someone you shouldn't do this. It's like kind of like you got to answer your own call to like what medicine your heart is calling you. I've found to have equally powerful experiences through somatic breath work and other things as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of tools out there available to us today, but I just wonder how different the world would have looked had AA and NA had those things, been a part of that program. Because I know that's one of the most powerful modalities for, curing addiction. And so I just think it's fascinating.
Yeah, you're speaking my language, and I think I really own my own sobriety today and making sure that like I know that my sobriety, one, it only matters to me. I do need to be honest with myself for sure on what I am doing. I do believe that people that do get sober need to pay their dues in sobriety and get at least a minimum of probably 1 year of sobriety before even doing a plant medicine, but everybody wants the hack, right? Everybody wants the hack. They want the easier way, which yes, it does that. And hey, if that's what you need to streamline it, that's fine. I just think hey, it took me 10 years to do a medicine, but I was also in a relationship with my ex who was like, I think she was president of the DARE when she was in grade school, like that anti-drug, like you.
Yeah.
So I know
that was me. I was the one going to my DARE officer, telling them where all the kids were getting their booze. I was like the party crasher.
Yeah. And so, when you get out of breakups, you realize how much you self-abandon in it, people pleasing. I'm like the ultimate people. I mean, I'm so much better, but like I can own that. But my sobriety's evolved. 10 years into my sobriety, I moved to San Diego. I believe God speaks through the mouths of other people. Every conversation I had, mushrooms was coming up. I'm like, okay, God, it's my time. I had a sober friend. Do you know Andrew Schultz?
Yeah.
He used to teach yoga at Core Power and Breathe Degrees. Yeah, I love him. All in Andrew. He's such a good dude. He went before me and he gave me permission. So this is the importance of like the lone wolf and the first follower ideas. Like when you can step boldly into something, or you can be in a yoga class and just breathe with a little bit more purpose, that person next to you, you're giving them permission to do the same. When you're honest in a small group and you're sharing your shit and you think that you're separate or you're different or your problems are unique, but then yet you sit there and you hear somebody else's story and you're like, oh my God, I'm not alone. Yes, because pain is what connects us all. Pain is part of the shared human experience. My pain looks different than yours, but we're all just trying to find freedom from that pain. And that's why we have to come back to yoga, right? Because I say it's not freedom for ourselves, it's freedom from ourselves. So to get the fuck out of our own way, I teach this stuff. And I can walk outside and go to that slow ass drinking fountain outside our studio and start like cussing at the water fountain after I just dropped all these quotes and like, so don't get it twisted. Like I am in the work with you, but I'm so grateful for the work because I know I'm a lot more free than most of this world. But I know like I got a lot of work to do, but I love where I'm doing it in this land in Encinitas. I feel like it is so sacred. And maybe it's been, maybe that needs to be brought back also, the sacredness of this land and the energy of it. And so it all comes back to yoga. Like that is crystal clear to me.
That's beautiful. I love how transparent you are about where you're at in your journey. You know, I feel like so often people, especially in a position of, teaching spirituality, teaching, yoga and meditation, these things, we feel like, I know me as a breathwork teacher and, somebody, a leader in the community, running a business, and I have all these young eyes looking up to me. And, sometimes I get this, I sit down with every single new hire that I meet and I tell them like, I am the furthest thing from perfect. Like, don't get it twisted. Don't get the idea that somehow because I'm teaching these things that I'm perfect. I make mistakes. I get triggered. I lose my temper. I make mistakes. The difference is I own them when I make them and I work towards being better every single day than I was the day before. But that doesn't mean that just because I'm teaching this stuff that I've mastered it. I'm teaching it because I'm trying to, I'm trying to learn it myself. And that's why I teach it. Same with breath work, same with, leadership stuff at Choice. It's, the way to teach or the way to learn is to teach, and I love that about you. You found things that work for you. And before you've even finished a book, you're teaching a course on it because you're like, not only do I really want to get this and sink it in, but I also want to help other people get this. So I love that. You mentioned earlier, like answering the call and like the coming back. And so, what has that been like? You moved, from Arizona, to Encinitas, California, and started a whole new life here. What's that been like, answering that call to teaching here and kind of building community here?
Yeah, I love that. It's just funny that the lyrics that you hear and some of the music that you listen to, which is why we know that music is medicine. And I say that with conviction, especially around Rufus, because this is an interesting story for me. I was really locked up in my body and didn't really dance a lot before my first mushroom journey 2 years ago when I moved here. And again, that's I think what I was talking about earlier. And people were talking about it all the time. And I finally did it. And it changed my life forever. This dog that just came up in this picture, I'll show you him again. This guy He came in my journey. I went through the grief of another dog that I lost in a breakup that's still alive, and it wasn't the ideal way. In fact, I never really got to say bye to the dog, which is beautiful. I needed that because it's actually what set me free to move here. So everything is always happening for us. You know, you hear the saying, "Everything is happening for us, not to us, for us," right?
Totally. And also the wound is the place where the light enters you. Like when you let the pain open you, like it leads you somewhere. It takes you somewhere more beautiful than you could have imagined for yourself.
Well, and you just said it. So it's not even, the saying is everything happens for you, not to you, but it's actually everything happens through you. You know, it's not, better. It's through you. You literally just described that. Right. And so it's a nice way to say, okay, this just happened. Now, what do you do with it? Life comes down to like, what has your attention? And then what's your intention, right? So what has your attention right now? That's awareness. The more you practice yoga and more meditation, the more you're going to aware that your mind has left and you'll come back. But if you're not practicing it and you think people say they want these things, but they're not willing to do the work. Like anything worth it is not going to be easy. And when you live in a world that's addicted and afflicted to distraction, and then we've got all the generational shit, and then you've got all of media and algorithms and everything they're trying to tell you to capture your attention. You have the biggest companies in the world hiring the smartest people in the world to collect these algorithms to capture our attention.
Yes.
So if you don't have practices like
what is that movie? Social Dilemma.
Oh yeah.
Like,
but I mean, when I go back to my mushroom journey, I'll let him down because I know he's probably like sniffing into the mic. But I grieved this dog Bubba, and I was like, Bubba, I love you, but I gotta let you go. And I was snot bubble crying in this journey. It was I did like a 4 gram blindfolded.
Oh my
first thing I put in my system in 10 years, and I just got rocked. And I just remember finally letting my hand go. And it was so sad and so beautiful. And it was grief. I felt grief, like visceral grief. I know how to heal now. I thought I grieved before. I'm like, oh, dude, you hadn't done shit.
Yeah.
Like this is grief. And the reason I know it is because somewhere on that journey, a few stops later, this little brown Frenchie shows up in my journey, and I start saying brown, brown, brown. And my facilitator afterwards was like, who's brown? And it was this exact face that I saw.
No way.
In the journey.
That adorable little face showed up.
This face. My breeder, she had known about the breakup and our 3rd dog we got. And she knew, and she said, next litter you can choose. And she sent me the picture like a week later after she had the litter. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the dog I saw.
Wow.
And some people think we look alike. What do you think?
I see a resemblance for sure.
Yeah, so this is the importance of like why we heal, and we have to feel it to heal it. I felt the first time in my life what it feels like to grieve. At the center of the wound is where our freedom lies. And I went there, but I wouldn't have been able to get there on my own. I could have got there maybe meditating for 20 years.
Yeah. But it's all part of it though, right? Wouldn't you agree? I mean, I went to Peru last year and did a 10-day retreat in like the middle of the Amazon, nothing around, and worked with Shipibo shamans and drank ayahuasca and did that whole thing. And it was interesting because the most profound, I mean, a lot happened on that trip, but one of the most profound things that happened was I connected with, my higher self, maybe God, whatever you want to call it. I don't even know, but somebody was talking to me and saying to me like, you have to do the work, like stop looking for the answers outside of you. Because I was avoiding the pain of going through a breakup in a relationship that I knew was not right for me. It was dragging my life down. It was dragging me down. It was very toxic. And I was afraid of the pain of leaving. So I was like, well, I've heard that, ayahuasca cures addictions. I feel like I'm addicted to this relationship. So let me go do ayahuasca. That'll make it easy for me to leave the relationship. And the interesting part is that it didn't make it easy. But what happened was, it told me that I already had the answers and I wasn't willing to do the work, and I needed to go home and I needed to do the work. And it was like, I got this crazy lecture, like you need to meditate every day without exception. You need to stop drinking. You need to do this. You need to do this. And it almost felt like I was being, lectured in a way. And it's funny because I came home expecting to be different, and I wasn't different. I was the same. I had awareness, like the medicine showed me and gave
You gotta
me
do the work.
it gave me like, what I kind of already knew on some level inside that I didn't want to acknowledge. And then I actually had to go through the hard part of feeling the pain of the loss of the relationship and being okay with that. I had to go through the grief and the suffering. I had to do the work. I had to show up every day, rain or shine, and meditate. And in the beginning, I felt like it's not doing anything. Everyone says life is bliss. Like I'd meditate for an hour, and then I'd like go yell at my kids for leaving dishes in the sink. And I'm like, what's wrong with me? And it's like, but it's been now, God, like a year and a half, almost 2 years, and of doing that daily meditation practice. And now it's like, once you put that work in, that time in, you get this, like, you get these awarenesses, you get this, it's just a little shift in perspective, or it's just a little clarity, a little insight that maybe you wouldn't have had otherwise. It's like you're opening up your awareness, and you get an opportunity when you have that space and that awareness and that clarity to make a different decision. So where, a year ago, I might've seen a dish in the sink and lost my temper at my kids. Now I see a dish in the sink and I'm far from perfect. I might still do that in the future, lose my temper. But now it's like I see that dish in the sink and I have a moment where I can like pause and I can think about like, what's the best way to handle this? Because it's like it slowed me down and it gave me this like zoomed out way of looking at things and thinking. But it took time and it took work, and it wasn't easy, and it was hard to wake up and do that every single day and stay committed to the practice. But that's why it's called work. I don't think it'd be called work if it was easy. And I think everyone would be doing it if it was.
Exactly. That's what I say in class in the beginning. You've probably heard me say it's called breath work for a reason. If you work it,
Totally.
it starts to work itself. You have to dial it in and get it going and build a foundation. And everybody wants the easier, softer way. But the truth is, the way through it is actually easier, even though it seems harder, because what it's easier than is trying to do the same thing over and over again. And this all comes back to the teachings of Rick Rubin, where early on, in my life, I was like, I'm not creative because I can't draw. So my interpretation of being creative was artistic, because I literally can't even barely draw a stick person.
That's me.
So I said that once out loud, and my friend was like, "Yes, you are. What about your yoga classes?" And I was like, "Wow, I didn't think about that." And so that was probably 8 years ago. And then this book comes out, and he says we are all creative. Wow. All creativity means is just actually doing something different than you've ever done it before.
Wow.
So if you're in yoga class and all of a sudden you've never breathed loud enough to actually hear it, which why wouldn't you, if the breath is the number one priority in the practice, why wouldn't you want to hear it with your ears? Because if you can hear it with your ears, and if it's off kilter, you'll be able to bring it back. So the more awareness you can bring, but most importantly, the breath is what connects us all. Yeah. It's the one thing, and it's like that permission. And so I don't know if you've noticed these last couple of months, but there's a massive shift in the way people are breathing and oming in class and making fluttering
and sighing
lips,
and sighing.
And sighing,
you encourage people to make noise, let it out. Like, don't worry about what people think. And it's so fun. It's so fun to see, like, you'll do it and you'll do it again and you'll do it again. And the progression of like, so this happens in like my breathwork classes when I'm leading. It's like, make noise if you need to, let it out. And it's like everyone's holding it in, and then one person lets it out, and then it's like that gives someone else permission, and then someone else permission, someone else permission. Before you know it, you've got a room full of like crying, yelling, whatever people in breathwork. But I've noticed that even in yoga, where you're like, make noise if you need to, like, let it out, and then you hear people hold back, and I feel like you're very intuitive in the way that you teach, because some classes I notice you do it, some classes I notice you don't. Like, it's like you can tell when people are holding back, and you keep pushing for us to let go. And then you hear the sighs get louder. You hear more people giving more people permission to like let it out. And by the end of class, everyone's like, or like making noise. And it's such a beautiful thing to see. Like, it's okay, take up space, let it out, make noise if you need to. Like, these expressions are welcome here. And it's such a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah, to me, every time I hear that, I say it out loud sometimes, because it's exactly what I'm feeling. Yeah, the sound of freedom, and it's why Tyrone from Rufus nailed they nailed the album name, Surrender. Like, you could not. Well, there's one I think you could think of a better name, maybe like Freedom, but you have to surrender to be free, right? So I'm like, you could not have nailed it and that story of surrender, that album tells so much that's relevant to my life.
Yeah.
And it's important for people to hear that, right? And understand that like everybody has shit. And yeah, when Rick Rubin talks about it, what stops us mostly from sharing our own creativity or doing something different, something as simple as letting out a sigh or fluttering your lips with some noise. So I'm always like, so if I ask you to do that and you don't, just look at why you don't. Yeah. Look at the aversion. Look at it. Don't beat yourself up. Just what is stuck? Like, why wouldn't you want to clear out that? If you had a big ass knot in your shoulder, you would want to do that. So we spend a lot of time in the hips, but we also need to spend time in the throat chakra.
Totally. I love it. Okay. So, we're coming up on our time here, and I want to ask you one more question, and then I want to find out I want you to share how people can connect with you further and where they can find you. But the last question I want to ask is like, you've come through a lot of adversity with your injury that, took you away from the sport that you loved, and then addiction, and then, recovering from addiction, and then answering the call to move. What would you say to somebody, who's going through a hard time right now? I know you and I both have lost loved ones to suicide. It's such a painful thing to see and experience. And there's people out there every day struggling. What would you say to somebody who's going through a hard time right now, and maybe they're near that rock bottom? Like, what is one piece of advice that you could give them to help them move through that?
I would say ask for help. And that advice I would give to my coach, David Meltzer, who's an amazing thought leader. He lives up in Orange County. When I moved to California, I had a lot of financial insecurity about coming to a place that's twice as much. I mean, I was living in Arizona and Scottsdale. It was rather expensive, but not Cali expensive. Yeah. And so naturally, because I live in a dysfunction of a generational dysfunction of scarcity, like most of us do, that it was coming up for me when I moved here. And my coach, I have these guardians and these mentors. Like, this is coming back to the Rick Rubin. Like, if you curate the quality of what you allow in, and you're quiet enough to actually see what's going on, you'll be awestruck by the miracles and the signs. And you get to piece together life's little riddles and God's little riddles. And I struggled with that, like God or universe. And in my experience, I have no religious tie to any religion. Yeah. And I'm not done feeling bad about saying God or feeling like I have to include everybody else. Like it's that big, it's that small. Yeah. But this is something in the last month, and maybe because I have miracles that I'm witnessing that have given me that faith and knowing.
Good.
But now I have no problems, and I'll help break that stigma. Let's get over it. Come on.
Yeah.
Beautiful. One God, many paths. You can try to figure it out. My guess would be that Jesus came to this earth as another vessel, just like you are, and just like I am.
Yeah.
And humans idolized a human being that was just trying to serve.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love this.
So I would say ask for help.
There's as many paths to God as there are people on this earth, and that kind of sounds similar to what you're saying. Yeah. But back to your advice.
Yeah, ask for help. And my coach said, you're paying to be in the country club now. So, he said, you're going to have to pay more. You're going to have to invest, but think about the opportunity in California.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, yeah. But we had him on the podcast, and we asked that same question. Same context. And he said, ask for help. I love that. And I do that. That's kind of my superpower now. And if your voice is stuck and you can't sigh with some vocal tone in yoga class, you probably are struggling to ask for help.
Yeah.
And your voice is meant to be heard. And I've been blessed to teach for so long. And in yoga, the majority it's more women than men. It's changing, especially my classes. But, I have women come in, and I can just, like my mom, for example, she in third grade, her choir teacher made fun of her singing and told her she wasn't good enough to sing. I believe that she lost her voice her whole life because of that. I remember making fun of her, and I was like a little shit in fifth grade, because I was a little shit when I was young. And I made fun of her for singing. I remember being up in Sedona, because she would take us to Sedona because she didn't have any money, but we lived an hour and a half, and I didn't even realize what Sedona was until I started actually getting in the work and the practices and getting tuned in with energy and the land and sacredness of these places. And this place is an hour and 45 minutes for me. Like, thank you, Mom. One, for getting me into yoga and taking me here for vacation. I know that's all you could afford. but fuck, this is so grounding and so perfect. And she turned me into this little athlete that was like now this yogi that used to walk around and tell everybody to like push through the pain and no pain, no gain. And now I'm like, go love yourself. Like, what?
I
Yeah.
love that.
So
Awesome.
yeah, definitely ask for help. And I would say, like, if you think your problems are unique, you are not alone. I started a podcast with an NFL football player who we called it Comeback Stories. And our mission was to reach as many people as possible to remind them that they're not alone. My pain looks different than your pain, but we're all the same. Pain is what connects us. And if we all were doing the work, COVID would have been, I loved it because it was one big, long meditation. It didn't affect me business-wise. That's why I can say I love it.
Yeah.
But it also forced people to face their shit.
Yeah.
And so ideally, if everybody was in the work, that would have connected everybody. But because there's unfaced fear and trauma, everybody's shit came up and it created diversion, whether that was planned or not, but it happened. Another great reason to stay in the work.
Totally.
And you're not alone. You're just not alone. Like my shit, if I told you my story in depth, all those people listening to you that like did drugs and got arrested once accidentally and are still making them pay for that. I'm like, wow, you have no idea. You're not alone.
Yeah. That's so beautiful and so important to remember. Ask for help and you're not alone. You're right. I think one of the biggest problems with, people that are suffering today is that they feel isolated and alone. And there is, I'm very much a lone wolf and I'm a survivor. I had to figure it out on my own. I always have. And, I had like one of the roughest days of my life. Even like 2 days ago, I had an emergency root canal and it was like, I was in more pain than I've ever been in my life. And I've had 3 children. And I was in more pain than I've ever been in my life. And a few of my friends were like, I feel like a jerk. I was sending all these silly memes and stuff. I had no idea. And I was like, it's a good reminder for me, that I still struggle with that. That's something I still struggle with is feeling like I have to have it all together, feeling like, I've got to look like I have it all figured out and not let people see me when I'm down, not let them see me when I'm hurting, not let them see me when I'm struggling. And, that's a selfish thing to do because I think it's important for people to know when you are hurting, when you are down, because it helps them to also know that they're not alone when they're having those bad days and when they're going through stuff. So I think it's important to share all of it, not just the good stuff, but also the tough stuff too. And it's a good reminder. So thank you for the advice.
The good stuff. The good stuff's not relatable. Like you said it earlier, perfect. Like who made up that word? It's not even real. And it's an image. It's an image that we're all chasing. And this is why when you have the not enough story and you're chasing perfection, you're continuing to validate the not enough story because you're chasing something that isn't even real. So it just keeps like, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy of I'm not enough. I'm not enough.
Yeah.
And it's like, what are you chasing? Like maybe take a step back, get perspective like you talked about and redefine your definition of success and then figure your shit out from there.
I love that. One of my mentors said something to me once when I was really struggling. I mean, choice has been a journey. We have had some really tough days. Having a high integrity business, we are the only people that do what we do. Like we are the last man, woman standing, if you will. When it comes to integrity, we don't pasteurize, we don't dilute, we don't HPP, light filter, AKA gamma radiate. Like we serve the purest quality, highest integrity ingredients. Even like our base, like our almond milk, that's the base of all of our smoothies and bowls. We import our almonds from Spain because you can't buy raw almonds in this country because they pasteurize them. And we believe in sprouting almonds because it breaks down the enzyme inhibitors and activates the nutrition inside, making it bioavailable. And so we go all the way. We're crazy. And I'm not the highest profitable business out there because I put integrity over profits. And I've had some really tough days with choice. And there have been some days when I would call my mentor and I'd just be like so beat up and so broken down and just wondering like, why is it so hard to do the right thing? And he used to tell me, he's like, what kind of a story would it be? You want to teach one day, you want to be on a stage and you want to like share your story and inspire the masses. What kind of a story would it be if you're like, yeah, I opened this business and everything worked out and it was all perfect and wonderful? Is that what people want to hear? You're living the journey. This is the journey. And this is the part of the story that's, it's tough and it's hard, but you're going to inspire people with a story, and you're going to show people that even though it's hard, it could still be done, And so that just reminds me of that.
Beautiful.
Well, Donny, you're amazing. Thank you so much for coming on today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I feel like I could talk to you all day, but I will be mindful of your time and I'll let you get out of here and get to your pups. Before I let you go, how can people connect with you? How can they find you and stay tuned for all the amazing things that are coming up soon?
I would say just Instagram. I'm trying to hand all that stuff off, and just another message. Like, I know it's important to grow your brand and you got to stay active on there. I know for me, what I've found is early on, I didn't create these systems and have other people managing that stuff, or like not getting sucked into that, and have people that can spend time on that so you can be creative. Yeah. So yeah, but Instagram is Donny_Starkins. My name, Donny, is spelled with a Y. My website is just my name, Donny Starkins. My podcast is called Comeback Stories. It's on all streaming platforms. You'll be able to find it everywhere, and all the events and all the retreats. It's just probably easier to go to the website for everything coming up, but look forward to May 5th. It's going to be, the venue we've already outgrown, so I don't know how quick it's going to sell out. We'll figure that out, but we'll be on a little tour with this little love mission that we have going on. But let's stay close. And when I have more space to talk about it, I'll come on anytime you want me on. Like, I can talk with you all day long. So we can make this as regular as you want.
Yes, please. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Donny. We'll be catching up with you soon. Thank you so much for listening in. If you've enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you could leave a review so we can reach more people. I might even share your review on future episodes. If you go to the link in the show notes, you can find and sign up for our newsletter so that you're notified when a new episode comes out. You can support this show by purchasing anything from the Choice Juicery online shop at choicejuicery.com. Or, of course, if you're lucky enough to live in San Diego, you can visit any of our 7 locations here in San Diego and Orange County. And please feel free to connect with me on social media at Nastasha McKeon. That's NASTASHAMCKEON. Don't forget that extra S. Or you can connect with us at the Choice Juicery Instagram at Choice Juicery. Thanks again for listening in.